Hi, and welcome to Dollars and Making Sense, a weekly show about finance, money, and investing. I'm your host, Ray Treverson from OTG Capital. We broadcast locally at Radio Northern Beaches here in Sydney and around Australia on the Community Radio Network. And I'm always pleased to welcome back to the microphone and the camera Natasha Panagis from the Institute of Financial Professionals of Australia, who is a superannuation subject matter expert. Welcome back, Natasha.
Great to be back. Thanks, Ray.
Wonderful. Now, this is part 2 of a 4-part series, ladies and gents, that we are doing about life insurance and TPD within superannuation. Now, just a quick recap from part 1, Natasha. We were talking about tax implications and we were talking about the difference between a tax dependent and a super dependent. So let's quickly cover those off before we move on.
Yeah, we did. So the first one we talked about was life insurance in super. There are differences in terms of who can receive your benefit from your super fund directly. It comes down to, are you a super dependent? And they are typically your spouse, your child of any age, any financial dependence or any interdependence. But for tax purposes, these people slightly change. For tax purposes, it's still your spouse. The main difference for tax purposes is adult child. So unfortunately, an adult child is not considered to be super dependent and will pay tax on any benefit that they may receive from your super fund because they're not considered to be a super dependent. So as long as the child is under age 18, they can get those benefits tax-free. But once they're 18 and over and financially independent, unfortunately, tax will be paid on any benefit they may receive from your super fund.
Okay, so go back to that previous show, ladies and gents. We've got some nice resources there. We talk about those in the show as well, websites, etc. So today what we're going to be talking about is another feature that life insurance policies have right across the board, and that really relates to if you get terminally ill but are not dead yet. Okay, so and we're not talking about TPD now. That's a different type of cover, which is still in something that we're going to be talking about in parts 3 and beyond. But today we're talking about terminal illness. So I guess in a broad nutshell, Natasha, just if we can go back and get that definition around what that means in a life insurance environment.
Yeah, of course. Look, many life insurance policies will include a terminal illness benefit, and that allows you to get your payout out early under a limited life expectancy. So simply put, if you're diagnosed with a terminal illness, super law allows you to get your super benefit out and any insurance as well, tax-free. This was all introduced back in July of 2008. But you've got to meet the terminal medical condition of release, and it's a 3-prong approach. So the first thing is that 2 registered medical practitioners must certify either jointly or separately that the person suffers from an illness or has incurred an injury that is likely to result in their death within a period, which is called the certification period, that ends no more than 24 months. So in other words, you need to have a terminal illness that says that you're going to pass away from that illness or injury within 24 months. And one of those registered medical practitioners is a specialist practicing in that area that's related to that injury or illness that is suffered by that person. And this certification period has not ended. In other words, you're still within that 24-month period. So that's the terminal medical condition in order to allow you to release that amount from super. And if you access your benefit due to terminal illness, you can withdraw the entire thing right away. I mean, you'd still be alive. You can access it entirely tax-free from your super as long as you do that within that 24-month period. But if there's some super left over after that 24-month period, your benefits still remain accessible, but withdrawing it might come with some tax implications depending on your age if you're doing that after that 24-month period. So you've got to meet those definitions.
I guess those definitions would be fairly strict, and I can't imagine as well that life insurance companies will happily write a big fat check for somebody unless they're pretty certain they're going to kick the bucket, so to speak, and pardon my parlance. But I guess from that perspective, what is the common misconception, I guess, in life insurance in super with regards to terminal illness access then? Do people get it a bit wrong compared to if a policy's outside of super? What's the story?
Yeah, look, a lot of people don't actually realise they can access their super early if they've got a terminal illness. People just think I'll get it when I pass away and it'll be a death benefit. But you can receive your super early if you've got a terminal illness and you meet those conditions. So another misconception is that a lot of people think they can only get their super if they have life insurance. But even if you don't have a life insurance policy, you can still access your existing super balance under the life insurance death policy, or in this situation, we're talking about terminal illnesses. So
it's a death benefit, isn't it, that they're trying to access?
And it's just paid earlier. That's all it is. So a lot of people, even if you don't have a life insurance policy that has a terminal illness benefit to it, you can still access your existing balance under the terminal medical condition rule, as long as you meet those requirements, those ones that I just spoke about. Just remember, holding a life insurance policy is not a prerequisite for accessing your super in this condition.
Right. I'm curious, once they've accessed this money, does it have to be spent on medical expenses, or can they go on a world trip?
Do whatever they want. As long as you meet those conditions, you can access it, take it out as a lump sum. Most people will be doing that to pay for their medical condition. Some people will want to use it and pay down some debt or pay off their debt. And others will, want to do that bucket list, tick those things off and, as you say, go on a world trip, jump out of a plane, whatever it is, or maybe even give an early inheritance to their adult kids.
If they're able to, I guess that there's a lot of options, but there's no restriction on what they can do with that chunk of change.
Not at all. You just got to meet those conditions, and you can do whatever you want with those benefits that you receive from your fund. It's your choice.
Okay, so let's be clear here. So if there is a life policy with a terminal illness clause in there, they can access that benefit. So I'm just going to pluck a number. Let's say it's 100K, and let's say the member has $50,000 in super sitting there, which was accumulating in accumulation phase. So if they get a terminal illness, they meet the conditions of release. The doctors have said, yeah, pal, you're out of here within the next sort of 12, 18 months. You got lung cancer, whatever. So they can actually get that 100K and the 50 that they've got sitting there, which they've been accumulating. Is that correct?
Correct. Yep, they can. And if they didn't have the insurance in there, they'd still be able to get their $50,000 out early as well. So it just helps if you have that additional insurance cover, but you don't necessarily need to have that. You can still access your super in any case.
I don't know how often this might happen, but what happens if they don't die within 24 months?
Well, that would be great news, wouldn't it, Ray? Yeah.
Yeah, but they've accessed this money, and all of a sudden the insurance company's sitting there drumming their fingers going, hang on, you were supposed to die. I've paid out. You're still alive. What's going on?
I have actually come across a couple of cases where that has happened.
Really?
Yeah. So they've made a miraculous, return, and they've beat the chances, and they're still alive, which is great news. But look, if that does happen, although they don't have any more super left, assuming they spent it all, then, if they've got that, if the 24-month period expires and they still have some super benefits left, they will still remain fully accessible for you. Like, you can still access them. But the thing is, any new super contributions that are made to your fund after that period ends won't automatically qualify for access again, unless, of course, you obtain a new medical certification to start another 24-month certification period again.
I'm curious then, would the life insurance companies feel aggrieved and try and recover these funds, or they just sit there and shrug their shoulders and go, hey, lucky you, we've paid out, and you move on?
Look, from their perspective is, did they meet the insurable definition? Right. And that's just what it comes down to. If you meet the definition at that point in time, then you've satisfied that requirement. So you can't claw that back. I mean, you met the insurance definition. We all know how hard it is to actually get something paid out from an insurance company. So if you meet the definition, you meet the definition. And if you make a turnaround, then that's even better. So
wow. And you just wave them into the sunset and say, good luck to you. You survived whatever the calamity that befell you.
Yeah.
I must admit, it's just one of those scenarios you could imagine. It'd be a double-edged sword, wouldn't you think? It's like, I'm going to die, and all of a sudden, oh, God, I haven't. And all of a sudden you've got, extra issues now knocking on your door, because I'm sure people would be sitting there going, was that, again, we read about all these people that are claiming diseases and illnesses as finfluencers, trying to scarper money out of the general public. To be able to do that with a life insurance company, as you rightly say, though, Natasha, it's an entirely different ballgame, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It is.
I'm pretty sure their assessors would be fairly strict. So very quickly before we go to our break, what are the payment options that are available, and are there implications between taking a lump sum juxtaposed to a pension in this issue of terminal illness?
Yeah, look, there are same options. So I mentioned in part one for life insurance, there are a couple of options. Same thing goes for terminal illness. So you've got the option of taking a lump sum,
Right.
commencing a pension, or a combination of two. But we're talking about terminal illness here, and most people, if not all people, will take a lump sum. I've got to say, I've not seen anybody wanting to start a pension with their terminal illness benefits. It just doesn't happen. And the reason why people don't do that is because there's generally no real tax concession for you to do that. The best option is to take that lump sum out. And that's because that lump sum benefit that you receive under terminal illness is completely tax-free, regardless of your age, right? So in most cases, super benefits once you're age 60 are tax-free. But if you're diagnosed with a terminal illness and you're under the age of 60, then that benefit will come to you tax-free regardless of your age, which is great, and which is why a lot of people go for that lump sum option. And the other option is just to leave it in your fund. Again, if you're obviously going for terminal illness, then you're wanting to get those benefits out.
Just doesn't make sense, does it? It really doesn't make sense. I mean, if you're going to make that claim, you go through all the palaver of the two doctors and the certification and the conditions of release. To sit there and then get a drib and drab with a pension, you're scratching your head going, why did you bother?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And look, if you go down that path and you want to start a pension, then if you're over the age of 60, that's fine. I mean, those pension payments will be tax-free to you. But if you're under the age of 60, they're going to get taxed at your normal marginal tax rate, and you don't get any special tax offsets for it. So it doesn't really make sense to start.
Doesn't make any sense at all.
No,
so
that's right.
I think that's somewhere. I guess when somebody is diagnosed that way, it pays to get a little bit of advice and somebody being able to point you in the right direction, so that you just do the right thing. The lump sum obviously sounds the best way to go. So look, we're at time for a break. You're here on Dollars and Making Sense, a weekly show about finance, money and investing. I'm Ray Treverson, and with me at the microphone today is Natasha Panagis from the Institute of Financial Professionals of Australia. We're going to take a short break, and we'll be back with you in just a moment. Hi, and thank you for listening to Dollars and Making Sense, a weekly radio program about finance, money and investing on Radio Northern Beaches and nationally on the Community Radio Network around Australia. The views, comments and opinions aired during our program should not be construed or viewed as financial advice. Any commentary is general advice only and does not take into account your objectives, financial situation or needs. You should consider whether the advice is suitable for you and your personal circumstances. If in doubt, you should contact an authorised licensed financial planner. We welcome questions and feedback, and you can get in touch with us via our blog, social media channels or email. Please search for Dollars and Making Sense in your favourite podcast platform, or check out our blog at otgcapital.com.au/blog. Hi, and welcome back to Dollars and Making Sense, a weekly show about finance, money and investing. I'm your host, Ray Treverson. With me at the microphone this week is Natasha Panagis from the Institute of Financial Professionals Australia. She is a subject matter expert on superannuation, and today we are talking about life insurance within super, and specifically, because this is part 2 of a 4-part series, we're talking about terminal illness. Now, before we went to the break, we were talking about the fact that pretty well all life insurance cover that we have today has an ability to pay out in full if you contract a terminal disease. Now, very quickly, Natasha, just a quick recap, these conditions of release on getting your hands on this cash are?
3 things. You need 2 registered medical practitioners to certify that you're not going to make it within a 24-month period. At least one of those medical practitioners must be a specialist in the area that relates to your injury or illness, and this certification period has not ended for those certificates. So you still got to be within that 24-month period. They're the 3 key conditions in order to get your super benefit out under the terminal medical condition of release.
So I guess one of the things in looking at the aid memoir that you sent through, it's an interesting thing because we're going to be talking about TPD in later parts of this particular suite of interviews on life insurance and super. Is permanent incapacity potentially a better option than instead of claiming for terminal illness?
Well, potentially. Sometimes a person may qualify to access their super under either the terminal illness or permanent capacity. The consequences of accessing super under each option can differ. Now, to satisfy we're going to go through this in more detail in part 3, but to just briefly, to satisfy the permanent incapacity condition of release, the trustee must be satisfied that the member is unlikely to ever engage in gainful employment for which the member was reasonably qualified by education, training, or experience. Now, so that's the definition for permanent incapacity or total permanent disability insurance. So this permanent incapacity condition of release could be suitable for a terminally ill member if the first thing is if they are under the age of 60 and they wish to commence a pension, and that's because the member will be entitled to a 15% tax offset on any taxable component of those pension payments, or they might want to go under the permanent incapacity condition of release if they want to roll over their benefits to another fund. So they can do that, and if they do that, you can get something called a tax-free uplift, which can be calculated by the fund and increase the amount of tax-free amount within your benefit and effectively reduce the amount of tax that you pay on the way out. But yeah, look, it will mainly benefit those people who are under the age of 60 and want to start a pension, because if you're starting a pension with terminally ill benefits, I mentioned before, there's no real tax concession for you to do that. So it's probably better to do so under permanent incapacity than terminal illness.
In that situation, again, because I run my own SMSF, I'm thinking out loud right now. It certainly sounds like an option you'd only really consider if you were with one of the big APRA funds, because they would be far better set up to be able to do that kind of pension payment and do the kind of structural setup of making those pensions happen. Is that a fair assumption to make?
Yeah, look, in a lot of cases, people will want to start a pension if they are in a large fund. If they want to get this additional tax-free component, you've got to actually roll out of your existing fund to get this tax-free calculation worked out. We're getting into the nitty-gritty here, but it's quite an important tax aspect that is worked out by the trustee of your fund, and you can only get it if you either take a lump sum out or you roll over your benefit from one fund to another. We're talking about permanent incapacity here. So in an SMSF, it's really easy as well to set up pensions, but typically people want to be doing this if they're going under permanent incapacity and they want to keep their benefit within super, accumulating, getting good growth rates and being taxed quite concessionally. So an income stream option is well worthwhile considering if you want to keep the amount in super and pay yourself a regular income as if you were still working, but you can't because you're permanently incapacitated.
So I think it deserves a little bit of a step back and looking at this situation, so that if you are facing terminal illness, I guess some of the considerations are going to be, obviously, what is that terminal illness and what are the short, medium and longer term impacts? Because mobility, I guess your ability to to do things or have a quality of life will certainly, I think, and I'm just thinking out loud now, would come into play for consideration. Is this the kind of thing that somebody facing this should be sitting down with an advisor to start working through these strategies of what's the best way to go? Is that something that you would recommend, Natasha?
Yeah, definitely. Look, there's so many complex financial and superannuation matters to address if you're facing this situation. There's impacts for tax purposes, impacts for estate planning reasons, and potentially even social security as well.
Right.
So yeah, look, there's all of these impacts depending on what choice you make. And, for example, if you've got a terminal illness and you are looking to take a lump sum out, then obviously that will potentially impact any estate planning wishes that you previously may have had. You might not care because your views may have changed. And similarly, if you're receiving Centrelink benefits, the effect of you maybe taking that lump sum out or maybe starting a pension can potentially impact any disability support payments you might be receiving. Look, these are just some of the things that may affect your situation. But if you sat down with an advisor, they'll be able to work through all of these things with you, and the tax implications. Depending on your age, depending on your balance and those proceeds, what tax components are within that benefit. Will you be paying any tax? What's the best tax efficient outcome? And what are your wishes in the end? Do you just care to get by, pay off your debts, make sure that you go out with bang, enjoy the rest of your life, or do you have estate planning wishes or things that you want to see happen in the future? Not that, do you want to rule from the grave? Things like that. So there's a whole range
Rule from the grave. That's hilarious.
It is. And, you can put these things in place and make sure that they happen beforehand. So it just comes down to your circumstances and what you really want to achieve in the end. And an advisor can walk you through the pros and cons of whatever you might be thinking.
I might just do a quick shameless plug here at this point in time for Justin Bott, who is the Media Services Information Officer for Services Australia, because you rightly point out there are quite severe impacts on social security benefits, because when people take out lump sums, depending on how much that money is, it can actually impact a pension to the point where they don't get the pension anymore. And some people are quite horrified. Now, again, when I was speaking to, and Justin's been on the show many, many times, it's something that a lot of people don't think about. And so, part of the reason that we do these shows is about education and I guess these options that are available. And again, the shameless plug that I'll say to people, and Natasha, for your own benefit and the people that listen to this podcast from APRA, Services Australia have a really cool service. It's free. They have financial information service officers, which you can call up. They've got a 13 number. Don't ask me to repeat it. I can't remember. Search it on the internet, please, knock yourself out. But the great thing is it's a great place to start and at least understand what the potential impacts are if you end up taking this big chunk of money. And I guess, Natasha, one of the things I noticed, particularly with kids when they first take up super, their life policies aren't for a lot of money. But again, when you get to 30, 40, 50, those elements can start getting to fairly sizable chunks of money, can't they?
Yeah, that's right. And then as you get older, those amounts will drop down again and then cut out. So it's this life cycle of age where your default levels of cover will start low, start to increase, and then drop and then cut out. So, but look, I mean, that's default levels of insurance. You can go out there and get retail insurance policies where you are underwritten for that insurance, and that is slightly different to default covers where you automatically get cover. If you go out to get insurance specifically, then you've got that policy for as long as you pay those premiums. Many of them will cut out at a particular age, maybe say 70 or older. But you're right, Ray. I mean, there are many implications, and really just important to seek some advice, whether it's from your financial advisor, whether it's from this free service from Centrelink, if you are receiving Centrelink benefits, just to see, what the implications
what the situation
may be.
is. Final question for you before we wrap up today's show. Previously, we've been talking about this cutoff age of 60 or 65. Given that the retirement age is now 67, from a policy and a regulatory perspective, can you eventually see that number 65 creeping up to 67 as well?
Oh, look, maybe, Ray. We've always thought, will this happen? Initially it was, 50, preservation age was 55, and then it finally has now increased to 60. Retirement age for super purposes is 65, whereas for Centrelink purposes it's 67. There's all these ages floating around. So potentially may happen where we may see that age for super purposes align with Social Security, but I don't think it'll happen anytime soon, because they've been talking about this for probably over 15 years, and we're not there.
Right.
So, yeah.
So you've not seen anything in discussion papers or white papers coming out of the current or future or past governments then? 15 years is a long time.
Yeah, exactly. Look, it was raised years ago to say there should be an alignment of ages, but it's just, it won't happen because there are different ages for different reasons. So I think we're safe. And 67 for Centrelink purposes is going to be that, and the different ages for super is going to be separate to that as well.
Okay, so wrapping up today, thanks kindly for being on the show, Natasha. We've been talking about terminal illness within your life cover within super, and again, ladies and gents, there's some great resources on the IFPA website. ATO is also a great place to start. And again, we've talked about a number of these different places. We're going to be moving through to part 3, which we're going to be talking about TPD. So again, this is another area of great interest because there's a lot there in definitions. So Natasha Panagis, thanks so kindly for being on Dollars and Making Sense.
That's right. Talk to you again soon.